Hollywood has a tell when they know they're facing disaster.
For the devil sends the beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short.
Despite what studio executives want you to believe, when a movie crashes and burns, they are almost never surprised. In the modern era of algorithmic tracking data, endless test screenings, and hyper-targeted internal metrics, Warner Brothers, Disney, and all the other smaller studios know exactly what kind of train wreck is barreling towards them months before a single ticket goes on sale. But here's the thing, they can't just stop production. Hundreds of millions of dollars are already locked in. The merchandise has been created and shipped out. The promotional tie-ins with fast food joints like KFC have been signed. So what does a studio do when they realize they're sitting on a massive radioactive flop? Simple. Their PR strategy shifts from selling a movie to managing a disaster. Welcome back to Hold My DualShock. We're Katie and Andy, and today we'll be talking about Hollywood corporate red flags. Specifically, the highly predictable, deeply cynical playbook studios deploy when they realize their next major blockbuster is actually an impending box office disaster. Our main case study today is going to be the next installment in James Gunn's DCU, Supergirl. Now, I want to be clear. We will be going to the theaters to see this film. We are not actively rooting for this film to fail, nor are we hoping that the movie sucks. We wouldn't want to waste our time with any bad film. But if you watch the early narratives being spun in the trades, the signs of classic studio panic are already starting to peek through the cracks. It's a pattern we've seen play out time and time again with projects like The Marvels and the chaotic production cycle of Captain America: Brave New World. When a studio has a guaranteed winner on their hands, the marketing strategy is beautifully simple. Hey, look at this awesome movie. Come have a great time. And the trailers speak for themselves. But when the studio knows they're about to drop a historic flop, the marketing turns into a defensive, highly calculated lecture. From shifting financial goalposts to weaponizing internet drama as a shield against bad writing. So today we'll be breaking down the ultimate corporate playbook when the studios know the end is nigh. Section 1. The mystical and unknowable budget.
The very first sign of studio panic almost always happens when talking about the budget, or more accurately, how the studios talk about the budget to the Hollywood trades. When the studio is confident, they want you to know exactly how massive the budget was. This is a spectacle after all, and they want you to believe that no expense was spared. But the second the studio starts to panic, suddenly the budget becomes this elusive, unknowable number. It has become common to see reports of major blockbuster budgets in the 2s and 300s of millions of dollars before being radically lowered. Just take a look at how they spun the early narratives regarding Supergirl. The initial budget was reported to be around $200 million, but as the enthusiasm and optimism dwindled, reports popped up claiming the budget right around the $175 million mark, or maybe even lower. There were even claims from outlets like Deadline that Supergirl only needs $315 million to break even. And the thing is that nobody, not even Supergirl's most ardent supporters, can argue that that number makes any form of sense, not in terms of believability, or even in terms of just basic movie math. But the thing is, they don't really care if you or anybody believes it. The studios just want to get out in front of the narrative early because, as the saying goes, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. And they hope that these numbers are picked up and recited enough that the truth becomes unknowable. These box office promises remain remarkably consistent, even as films like Supergirl undergo massive changes to their characters, endings, and composers. Reshoots, rewrites, and rehiring. All of these cost money, yet the budgets remain the same. And that's because the budget will be whatever it needs to be so that the film can maintain its optimism and hype until it comes out. It's why we see budgets retroactively come out that are far higher than anybody was willing to admit. If you want to see this corporate gaslighting played out at its most absurd, just take a look at Captain America: Brave New World. When the movie was in the midst of massive script overhauls and extensive reshoots, every major industry insider and independent tracking outlet noted the budget had ballooned to a staggering, out of control $350 million. And everybody remembers that number. It dominated the film news cycle for about a year. But once it became clear that the film was tracking poorly, the reports started coming out that actually Captain America: Brave New World only cost $180 million to make. I think it's unfortunate that so much of film discussion has been brushed aside in favor of numbers and financials. Obviously, box office returns and budgets are not indicators of a film's quality or creative worth. There have been $5 million masterpieces and $300 million streaming slop. There have been great movies that have been box office flops and terrible movies that have made studios fortunes, which raises a very valid question. Why does the budget matter? Why should anyone care? But budgets do matter because they matter to the studios. At the end of the day, these studios are not charities or artistic nonprofits. They're massive corporations. And businesses obviously cannot operate at a catastrophic loss forever without the wheels falling off. There will be people who argue that the studios are trying to get their budgets under control and that they're committed to creating a healthier and more viable filmmaking ecosystem. But that's not what's happening with these numbers. When the press starts playing games with the numbers right before the premiere, the studio isn't being financially responsible. They didn't find $100 million lying around in their pockets or jingle loose from their couch cushions. They're trying to erase the paper trail of their own production chaos because they know the box office returns won't ever justify the real receipt. So you'll see box office projections and budgets radically change to maintain the illusion of competence because actual success has long been off the table.
Section 2. The building brand trust excuse. Another tactic Supergirl has made apparent is when a studio expects a disaster, it stops selling the movie and starts selling the future. Once the studio stops believing that they can sell the narrative, that the film, in this case Supergirl, will be a success, they completely redefine the purpose of the movie. Supergirl went from being a sleeper hit that audiences were going to love, one that would build on the success of Superman and the revitalized DCU, to the next step in public outreach. Pundits who claimed that Supergirl could potentially outperform Superman because of all the goodwill from that film have regressed to talking about how much of a disaster DC is. So of course, Supergirl won't be financially successful. They are still rebuilding, even though last year was marked by those very pundits and news outlets proclaiming DC to be back. This is not just a Warner Brothers or DC Studios tactic. Increasingly, studios are getting away with moving the goalposts. When a movie is a guaranteed hit, the metric for success is incredibly simple. How much money did it make on opening weekend? Will this be their next billion-dollar success? Or at least close to it? But the moment a studio senses a box office bomb on the horizon, they suddenly abandon capitalism and transform into artistic purists who care deeply about the long game. Suddenly, the theatrical run doesn't actually matter anymore. You start seeing defensive press releases, trade write-ups, and studio-friendly pundits declaring that the film's real job isn't to turn an immediate profit, it's to rebuild audience trust. We also saw this exact tactic deployed recently with Star Wars, Mandalorian, Grogu, as well as the MCU. When the theatrical returns dwindle, the corporate strategy instantly pivots to bringing up streaming numbers or merchandise. If the theatrical audience rejects the product, the studio just pulls out a different spreadsheet from under the desk and claims they won a completely different game that nobody else is playing. Because the moment a studio, or their favorite media echo chamber, tells you a multi-million-dollar blockbuster doesn't need to make money to be successful, they're telling you they already know the audience is not showing up. And the thing is, this might sound like optimism or giving the studios the benefit of the doubt, but in reality, it's just enabling corporatism. And the sad thing is that it is the audience that will suffer, because it's the audience buying into these narratives that will be blindsided when the franchise or cinematic universe they're being told is right on track is ultimately scrapped. And I think it's worth remembering that the people reciting the corporate talking points for Supergirl and the DCU plan are also playing both sides and building out arguments for why the universe might not continue as part of some political stance. They know that the road ahead is rocky and uncertain. So the question becomes, why the projection of certainty? Section 3. Toxic fan shield.
When the studios start to feel the possibility of success slipping away, that's when they turn their most cynical. And this is what we're seeing with Supergirl. Once the studio realizes the film will be a financial failure and begins to question if the movie will resonate with audiences, the narrative tends to shift towards hostility. The audience is told that if they judge the film based on the marketing and trailers, that they're not simply uninterested customers, they are in fact bad people. Anything other than unwavering optimism for the film and the promise of spending money at theaters is met with indignation and resentment. We've seen this exact cycle play out many times before, but with Supergirl, what's surprising is how early this tactic started. Months before the film even hit theaters, the press abandoned trying to sell the film based on highlighting the actual plot, the character arcs, or even the filmmaking. Instead, the mainstream interviewers were intentionally leading the conversation into culture war talking points. Just look at the recent Vanity Fair profile on Milly Alcock. The interviewer actively teased her up by asking if the Game of Thrones fandom prepared her for the inevitable backlash she'll face just for playing a female superhero. The entire premise of the question is built on a pretense that Alcock would inevitably be faced with backlash, and that would be due to toxicity from the fandom due to her being a woman. Hollywood PR teams seem to survive by over-amplifying minute negative aspects of the internet. They simultaneously treat these groups as inconsequential and representative of a niche minority, not worthy of catering to because they are so small, but at the same time, use them as a scapegoat for why they believe their movies will inevitably fail. We saw this exact same tactic for the press run of the Marvels. Because Disney knew they had failed to deliver on creating a fun, cohesive sci-fi adventure, they instead had to dedicate a massive chunk of their media cycle to creating the illusion that they were having to fight online trolls and misogynists in the fanbase. The very same fanbase that had showed up for Captain Marvel. By manufacturing controversy, the studio creates a built-in defense mechanism. If the movie comes out and fails, the studio doesn't have to admit that the script was a disjointed mess, or the villain was underwhelming, or that the characters were underdeveloped. No, they can just point to those early interviews, blame a couple random internet trolls, and call it a day. The thing is, we only ever really see the studios use the culture war as a shield when they know a film's going to underperform.
Section 4. Self-preservation. It seems like the guiding principle in Hollywood is no longer to make great films, it's self-preservation. And that takes the form of studios distancing themselves from directors, and directors distancing themselves from bad films. And it's no different with Supergirl. The most important takeaway is that they know the films are bad. They're still going to try and sell it to you, but no one wants to take personal responsibility for the disaster. When a studio is confident that they have a massive hit on their hands, the director is hailed as a visionary. They are given full credit for every brilliant frame, every dramatic sequence, and every artistic choice, like they have currently done with films like Obsession and Backrooms. But the exact moment a studio panics, things drastically shift. The creators themselves start subtly drawing creative boundaries in the press and quietly reminding the public that they weren't the only ones calling the shots on set. Look no further than DaCosta's incredibly candid reflections on the production of The Marvels. During a screenwriting panel, she openly admitted that the film she made was a far cry from her original version. She said, "There was a certain point when I was like, okay, this isn't going to be the movie that I pitched or even the first version of the movie that I shot." She went on to describe the reality of directing inside a massive franchise like Marvel, saying that the way they make those movies is completely different from how she would ideally make a film. She said, "You just have to lean into the process and hope for the best. You kind of have to trust in the machine." Now, when a director refers to their own creative process as the machine and admits they just had to hope for the best, the studio has completely lost control of the narrative. And it isn't an isolated incident. Julius Ona, the director of Captain America: Brave New World, used the exact same telling phrase when asked about his biggest takeaway from making a massive blockbuster. He said that it was something entirely new to him, and adjusting to the machinery of working on a movie of that scale was a lot. And if you think this is just a legacy Marvel problem, the upcoming press tour for Supergirl proves the DC relaunch is running the exact same tactic. Director Craig Gillespie, a filmmaker known for his incredibly distinct, sharp voice in movies like I, Tonya, is already setting up his creative boundaries in the press. In a recent interview, Gillespie openly admitted that the filming process for Supergirl involved constant, heavy debates with James Gunn. He noted he constantly found himself clashing with Gunn's highly specific, cosmic, Guardians of the Galaxy aesthetic. Gillespie tried to spin it positively as collaborative friction, but when a director is already telling the trades about the massive creative compromises they had to make to fit the studio blueprint, even before the film is released, it reveals this film is no longer his own singular creation. This isn't artistry, this is corporate survival. In the corporate world, it's about covering your own ass. It's a polite, professional way for an artist to lay down a paper trail before the opening weekend reviews drop. It tells the audience, if the tone of this movie feels disjointed, uneven, and constantly at war with itself, don't look at me. I was just a cog inside James Gunn's machine. And look, it's totally natural for someone to want to take ownership when things are great and to want to distance themselves when they're crap. It's the fact that this is happening before the film is released that exposes the reality of the situation. They all know the film is not going to be good. They've known for a long time, yet they've pushed ahead anyway, and they want you to still spend your money and give them your attention. Hollywood markets itself as the pinnacle of creativity in filmmaking. They brand themselves based on their legacy and the idea that they pull the best talent, the most creative individuals. They have every tool and advantage at their disposal, but so often try and present themselves as these underdogs that we should invest in. Creatives fail upwards on narratives of unrealized potential, of failures that weren't their fault. Studios promise excellence and demand they be treated with the respect they feel that they have earned while blaming the very people they hired when the films fail to resonate. They want all of the benefit of the doubt without any of the expectation. Section 5. The activist obligation.
So many of the problems with Hollywood can be traced to a pattern of manipulation. This is evident when they stop trying to convince the audience that the film's a great piece of entertainment, and they start trying to convince us that buying a ticket is a moral imperative or a social cause. And we're seeing that creep into the discourse surrounding Supergirl. You can tell a film's going to be bad when there's more pre-release activism than actual interest in seeing the film. And we see this time and time again. Films that are fought about online that dominate the social media space, but ultimately fail to translate into ticket sales. And this is because it's easier to convince someone to fight about an aspect of film online than to leave their house, spend their time and money actually watching a movie. Now, don't get me wrong, ideally, the studio would prefer to guilt trip the audience and see that translate into box office success. But when that looks unlikely, they have no problem appealing to straight activism. So much of the exhaustion around film discussion comes from movies being turned into political or social lines in the sand. This has been a tactic in James Gunn's DCU. Projects have been promoted in terms of how they are important for right now, or that they will inherently appeal to a certain quality of person. And while many people would argue that Superman wasn't a box office disaster, it did fail to recoup its budget and did fall well short of projections. And as projections started to decline, that's when the tone of the marketing began to change. The marketing and media cycles of the film appealed to the immigrant narrative and the claim that the film would be a beacon of goodness for good people in a world that needed more goodness. Ironically, this emboldened an enormous amount of online nastiness. Anybody who didn't care for Superman was vilified. Kindness is punk rock became a slogan for othering people who believed kindness was more like interpretive jazz or any other music. And this has become all too familiar in Hollywood. Studios and creatives craft this narrative that it's morally good that their films get made, and therefore morally good to support them. In this way, they turn preference into a purity test. And anyone who prefers something else must be morally inferior, or a hater, or easily dismissible as toxic. Because they're not a person with opinions, thoughts, and preferences, they're something far worse. They're not us.
And right on cue, the Supergirl press tour is pushing the exact same sort of moral imperative to see their film. In a recent interview, Milly Alcock expressed that she wants young girls to walk away from Supergirl, knowing that it is okay to be a bit bad and messy. She said that she hopes her portrayal of a more lost and unsure Kara allows young women to embrace their imperfections, rather than feeling pressured by modern optimization culture. Hollywood has actually managed to pull off the groundbreaking but surprisingly legal process known as corporal-humanization, famously predicted in Community.
I don't recall seeing Subway in my premenopausal post-feminist experiential marketing class.
Actually, I'm on the wait list for the pre-men post-fem X mark.
Who are you?
Gang, meet Greendale's newest student, Subway.
Your name is Subway.
Yep. Using a groundbreaking but surprisingly legal process known as corporal-humanization, real people such as myself are now allowed to represent the collective humanity of business owners. I have contractually waived my birth identity and am now a man and student named Subway.
The manipulation and corporate co-opting of ideas is lazy, but sadly effective to some of the audience. With some people believing that giving money to a corporation is tantamount to changing the world for the better. And this creates just another round of unpleasantness in the life cycle of mitigating a disaster. Because as you would assume, Alcock's comments sparked a massive wave of varied reactions across the internet. While some fans and critics praised the decision to embrace an unconventional, imperfect superhero, others felt it was the wrong message to promote for an iconic character, or viewed her remarks as a calculated way to push back prematurely on fan reception before anyone has even seen the final product. When a movie is good, the narrative is built entirely on the strength of the story on screen. But when a studio is expecting a potential flop, they wrap the film in the flag of a social cause. They want to ensure that if you decide to skip it on opening weekend, they can claim it wasn't because the movie was mediocre, it was because the audience lacked the empathy to understand it. At the end of the day, Hollywood studios aren't nearly as mysterious as they think they are. Their panic has a very specific rhythm, a documented paper trail, and a completely predictable vocabulary. Once you know what to listen for, the corporate tell is impossible to miss. When they have a winner, the message is simple and distinctly free of buzzwords and narrative manipulation. But when they know they have a flop on their hands, the marketing turns into a defensive, highly calculated lecture. They will tell you why the astronomical budget is actually a lean $170 million, or whatever number makes profitability seem obtainable. And if they can't get that number low enough, then the box office never mattered anyways, because they're building brand trust. And if the brand trust isn't building, then they'll start assigning blame or explaining why criticizing the film makes you a toxic troll. And if all else fails, they'll try to convince audiences that watching the film is their moral duty as an upstanding and decent human being. That way, when the failure can no longer be denied, they can claim that they made a movie that was far too beautiful for this cruel world. That it was the audience that let the film down, not the other way around. If you've made it to this point, thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to our subscribers and members here on Patreon. And we'll see you guys next time.